Hello lovelies, it is Tome Therapist here with another video. I actually recorded a video to go up, but my editor is telling me that it will take some time to get it edited, so I am going to record a book review. I'm going to talk a little bit about a previous novel from this author that I really enjoyed, and then I will go into discussing the novel I just finished by her, and I will try to do it spoiler free until such point as I say there might be a minor spoiler, and then I'll give you a minute to tune out. But I don't plan to do any like major spoilers of the content. I just really want to highlight some of the things that I think the author did really well in this book, which I would say would probably be like light spoilers, if that, but I won't tell you the ending or anything like that. Okay, so the author is Julie Leong. I may be saying her name wrong, but this is the novel I just finished. It was the first novel I finished this year, and I picked this novel up, as I told you guys, I believe in my last video, because I really enjoyed the Teller of Small Fortunes book by this author. Now, last year, 2025, was one of the harder years that I have had, and a lot of that had to do with the US is on fire, along with a lot of other things. And being a therapist in this administration is very difficult because not only am I carrying a lot of heavy things for myself, for my family, my friends, and my LGBTQ plus community, I am also carrying a lot of that for many of my clients. And so I have to carry a lot of heavy stories. And that would be silly of me to pretend like that didn't take a toll on me. And last year, I was just really having a hard time. And I remember going to Half Price Books, and there was this book that normally I would not pick up sitting on the shelf there, and it was called The Teller of Small Fortunes. I do have that book here. And something about the front of it spoke to me. I love cats. I love everything about the vibe on this. The colors are beautiful. It's a cozy fantasy, though, and it's something I'm just starting to break into. Spell Shop was actually probably my first real foray into it, and I may talk about that author at some point too, because Spell Shop started a whole thing where I'm reading like all of the author's work. It's amazing. And this book was really speaking to me, even though it was cozy fantasy and it was something I was new to. And so I picked this up and I drove myself to a local nature park near me. And I took some water because hydration is important, hydrate or dihydrate, and a blanket and some things. And I went and sat in the shade because it's very hot where I live during the early summer. And I read this book for probably 3 or 4 hours. Now, that's not enough for somebody like me to read the whole book, even though it is kind of a smaller book. It was enough for me to realize, though, that this author is incredible. I believe this is her debut. Don't quote me on that. And it was just so fantastic. It is found family, which is something that's very important to me. My bloodlines, I'm not as close with, except for like one or two of my family members. But for the most part, found family has been my family over my lifetime. I did not have an easy childhood. I did not have an easy young adulthood. And that's why I'm a therapist, actually. That was what inspired me, was if I can make it through the hard times that I did, I wanted to be able to reach back a hand for others going through hard times. That's part of why I specialized in pediatric trauma therapy, along with other therapies. I work with neurodivergency quite a bit. I have autism, and then one of my specialties is autism. So I like to think that that also shaped a lot of who I am as a therapist. I try to bring in a lot of my own life experiences, and I try to show up as the person that I wish I had had growing up. I was not allowed access to therapy, and it was very stigmatized in the conservative community that I was in. And I'm trying to destigmatize it. That's part of what this booktube channel is for. All that to say, found family, super important, really resonated with me in this book. The characters are very beautiful in this book. There is divergency, of course, in them. There is a heart in each of them. Even though the characters aren't super fleshed out, I wouldn't say that we go into every aspect of their history. Within such a small novel, the characters that become so important to you are almost life changing as a reader. I genuinely think that this book changed who I am as a person and the way that I view the world in some ways. I feel like it opened my eyes to a lot of things, and yet it's still a cozy fantasy. Like, you don't go into this worried about these giant high stakes. There is stakes in this book, do not mistake me. The plot line is fantastic as well. it's just not the high stakes that you might get in a big high fantasy series. I loved this book so much. In fact, I loved it so much that I bought a copy of the Owl Crate version of it because they did like a special edition. I don't know if you can see it too well from there, but they did a special edition with these beautiful end pages, this beautiful cover with golden art in there. And I got this on Mercari. So I get some of my used books on there, like the special editions, because you can get them a little bit cheaper sometimes. But that's how much I love this book. So when I saw The Keeper of Magical Things on the bookshelf, I knew I had to pick it up. I had to look at it. And one thing from reading the back, so I don't think this is really a spoiler at all, this is an LGBTQ plus novel. And it's actually more LGBTQ plus in such a positive way than I thought it would be. One thing to know is that I'm a lettered member of the community. LGBTQ plus rights and advocacy are super important to me, not only for my clients, not only for my family members and friends that are a part of it, but because I myself am a lettered member of the community. And that being said, I like to read novels where it's included as if it was normal, not where it's like preached or shoved down my throat. I'm already all about LGBTQ plus everything. I don't need to read something that comes across as very preachy. It kind of triggers my conservative religion days of my childhood. It's just not for me. I don't want something preached at me. What I do like though is when you act like it's just a normal part of everything. You can talk about the toxicity surrounding it. You can talk about the way that society views LGBTQ plus in such a negative way. That's all very powerful and beautiful. It does not need to then go into preachiness, though. This novel never does. I really enjoyed the way that the author just made everything seem very normal. She does talk a little bit in here about how there are certain communities that aren't going to accept people because they look like this or that, or that they have LGBTQ plus tendencies, or anything like that. But she does not do it in a preachy way. She does it in a way where it's just very included in society as normal, as it should be. LGBTQ plus people have been here as long as people have been. Just because it wasn't maybe as talked about as much as broadly, just because it wasn't so forward in everything, doesn't mean it hasn't been around for absolutely ever. And then to act like it's a divisive thing that we're going to split politics over or we're going to split religious beliefs over it, that to me is just part of like weaponizing politics, weaponizing religion. That wasn't really the intent, at least to my understanding, of most of the major religions out there. They were never meant to be weaponized to hurt people. And that's unfortunately what happens a lot in today's society, probably societies for quite some time. We like to do what's called othering. And othering, again, to my understanding and my meaning of the word, is taking somebody that is other than us. This could be ethnicities, this could be LGBTQ plus, really anybody that we want to see as other, and then we make it a negative. We try to turn it into a negative. We try to talk bad about it. We try to weaponize it for things. I tell people all the time, no matter what side of the aisles you end up on, whatever your politics are, wherever you are, those people are in it for the money. They There's a few good eggs out there, but for the most part, they're getting paid a lot of money to do a job. And their job only exists if there's controversy, if there's people arguing over things. So there's a lot of financial gain in being divisive, in othering, in weaponizing religion. And I think that is very sad that based on finances, we can sell who we are as people. Um, it's the reality that we live in. I think this author does a great job of not othering, of being very inclusive, and making it seem very normal in this world, which I super appreciated. Now, I will say, all things considered, this was not as good as The Teller of Small Fortunes. That book, for me, was one of my top two books last year. The other book was a very vastly different book called Born by Vandermeer. If you haven't read a Jeff Vandermeer, he is, I think they call him the father of new weird fiction. He's not going to be for everybody. He does have some body horror stuff in there. I love his author writing. He's most famous for the Southern Trilogy. The first one, Annihilation, got turned into a movie. So Born, in a very different category, was my other top favorite of last year. This one, though, I do think is accessible for most people. I do feel like it has themes in there that are going to resonate with everybody, whether you are LGBTQ plus lettered yourself, or if you are an ally or an advocate, or you have friends and family members, chosen family. If you have anybody in those categories, I think this will be a great novel for you. And it's cute. It's not going to be your most meaty read of the year. You're going to get through this and you'll be like, wow, I feel like warm and fuzzy for having read this book. One thing that she does is there's the main LGBTQ plus characters that I knew about going in here. She also has an additional LGBTQ plus character, at least one in there. And it's just done so casually that I respected it and had to reread those scenes with that character in there because of the way that it was just so normalized. So I am going to go into a very light spoiler on what that character is. If you have not read this book and you think you want to, you can go ahead and skip this section. It'll probably just be me talking for maybe 1 to 2 minutes on that character and talking a little bit personally about why that character meant something to me. And I do have the gift of gab, so maybe err on the side of 2 to 3 minutes. This video is not going to be edited because my editor told me it's going to take about a week to get the other video back that I recorded. And so I need to record this one with no editing to be able to get up to you on time. Okay, spoilers incoming. Very, very light. Just talking about this one cute character in there. So there is a character in here, and this character is, I don't know if you would call it a stable person, but they work in the stables and they're a very prominent head of the horses and the stables that are there. And the character is always consistently like, as the character is introduced in everything, they, them pronouns. And it was done in a very subtle like way, just the way that the main character is thinking about this character. She calls them they, them in her head. She's very respectful of the pronouns. The throughout the text is very consistent. I was keeping my eye out because I was looking for the one time where they accidentally mispronounced or something. Not once. This character was always referred to as they, them. I really respected that. Somebody very close to me, actually, two people very close to me, are non binary. And so using they, them pronouns, but including it as a character that mattered was really important to me. Like, I actually found myself in tears seeing they, them character represented this way. Non binary rights, while I am not non binary myself, I have such a huge passion and deeply ingrained everything for non binary people. They fall under the trans umbrella. So trans people in general, I am passionate about, but non-binary, I have a lot of people close to me that are very specifically non-binary. So passionate for them, and to see this representation in this book was emotional for me. And the character is not like a super main character, but they come up several times in the story, and it's always the correct pronouns they, them, and it's always very normalized and not standing out. Maybe if you weren't really looking for it or you weren't as impacted by non-binary people, you might not have even noticed the they, them pronoun use. I just happen to be very in tune with that because it's so cool to see it and I'm always cheering. So I just really enjoyed that. All right. I think that was pretty much a spoiler for that character. Another thing I liked in this book was there were a few little animal companions. I will say not as many as in The Teller of Small Fortunes. And here I think animal companions are talked about quite a bit more. So I did like the animal companions a little bit more in this one. In this one, there was a couple of animal companions. They were not as prominent to the storyline, but they were still done very cutely. They were not necessarily anthropomorphized, meaning that they weren't necessarily given personalities of a human. They were still very much animals. That doesn't mean, though, that animals don't deserve our respect or deserve prominent places in our literature. So it was just really cute to see that inclusion in here. And ultimately, the story, it was really a story, I feel like, of going from prejudice to opening your mind. Something that, again, LGBTQ plus rights, I wish more novels did this, where they allow a flawed main character to go through the progress of figuring out their flaws and then saying, okay, look, I was wrong, and not always being able to get there right at first. Even as their personality starts changing, it is really hard to say I'm wrong. It's hard for me to say that, and I have so much training in mental health, and it's very hard for me to say when I am wrong. It is very hard for me to admit that. So seeing these characters when they go through the flaws, having that difficulty saying I'm sorry or I was wrong on that, and then kind of watching them get to that point where they can actually start admitting it, and then where they can openly embrace the fact that, like, I used to be this way and now I am not this way. I think we need to do that more often in literature. I think there's a lot of tropes out there. Some I like, some I don't. um, One of the ones that I wish was more done was flawed characters being allowed to be flawed and being able to go on a journey of progression that is in itself flawed. And again, this is a shorter novel. I think it's 300, yeah, it's about 350 pages long. So it's not a super long novel, but within this novel, I think that the theme of flawed, flawed journey to changing your mind, and it's not even done. You can tell that by the end of this, when we get to the end and everything's kind of gone through the resolution it needs to, because these are standalone. I believe they're set in the same world where they seem to be very similar worlds, but each of these are very standalone novels. And we get to the end, and I can already see where the characters still have growth to go. And that's okay. I don't want to speak for the author, but my guess is that the authors probably intended that. That theme was not quite as obvious, I think, in this one for me, but there was still a little bit of that. There was still a little bit of, in the Teller of Small Fortune, there was a little bit of being able to understand that we have gone through this journey and there's still some more to unpack. We've tied up the ends that a reader needs to. I feel very completed after both of these novels. And it still makes them feel real enough that they're still going to be going through a journey, even though I'm not involved in their journey anymore. It's kind of fun to think that these fictional characters, I do know they're fictional, but I do get attached also. I think it's fun to think of these the characters continuing their journey without me. Like, they've gotten this cool part of their resolution of this snapshot in their story, and then they're going to go on and continue their journey. And so Keeper of Magical Things was a really good one for me. I think I ended up at a 3.75 with this one, whereas Teller of Small Fortunes was a 5.0 for me. But 3.75 is very respectable for me. Anything really over 3.0 is one that I would recommend to some people at least. And 3.75 certainly for me says that this was a great novel that I think a lot of people could enjoy, at least in this category. Sometimes I give a novel like Born from Jeff Vandermeer 5 stars, and I recognize that that's very much not for everybody because of some of the more horror-esque aspects of it. Overall, though, definitely recommend this author. Anytime she publishes anything, at least as far as I can tell, I will be picking it up and reading it ASAP. I think it's really cool to get this new voice in the field. I think it's really cool to see cozy fantasy done with intent and with very well thought through LGBTQ plus themes and chosen family themes of flawed characters being allowed to be flawed, being allowed to go on the journey of self exploration. Because at our core, as humans, again, these are all my perspectives, but having worked with clients as long as I have and just been on this earth for as many years as I have, I genuinely think that we are all with flaws. I don't think any of us don't have things that we couldn't work on, we couldn't grow on, we couldn't move towards better aspects of ourselves. I think there are always better versions of ourselves out there that we can work towards. And I do love that we have an author who's willing to embrace all of those sides and being willing to talk about the flaws as a positive thing in the ultimate aspect of our journey through life. So, very powerful themes covered in a very cutesy novel, and definitely something I would always want to know more from this author. I remember reading Teller of Small Fortunes and feeling almost sad that there wasn't more to read from this author already, because it was just so good for my soul. If you believe in that kind of thing, it felt so good at the end. I felt less in my head. I felt less sad. I felt less heavy. And like I said, 2025, it was a very, very difficult year for me for so many reasons. A big one being, what's going on in the US right now. And to be able to even have those moments after reading these novels and feeling like there's hope for things, that there are paths through things that we don't even recognize or see, and feeling like there are people out there, authors like this, the community that this author is hopefully building for her readers, knowing that those things exist and that we can all be in this kind of wholesome space together is part of why I'm doing this booktube. I want there to be a space where people can feel like there are safe things to be said. I do feel like safe space gets overused nowadays. I love the idea of safe space, but I do think, again, that's one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot, like self care. And while safe space and self care are very important, I do think those terms get so overused that they almost become toxic in and of themselves sometimes. That's a whole rant I could go on a different day. I will say, though, it is important to have community spaces where you feel like you are seen, where you feel like you are heard, and where you feel like you don't always have to have scary things thrown in your face. You don't really have to face some difficulties sometimes. I mean, I think that's why we read in the first place, or at least me, is escapism. I, from a very early age, found myself in a pretty hard life growing up, and it was very isolating. It was very conservative, very uh, weaponized religion, the way that I was raised, and I was not allowed access to people. I was not allowed, not many anyway. I was not allowed access to very many books. And the books I did have, I would hoard and read over and over again. And I always dreamed I would have a library someday. They were my escape. They were my door into another world. And I know we talk about that a lot, like, hey, this is a door you can, as long as you have a book, you can go into any world. I think the quote from Stephen King is that books are portable magic or something to that effect. Hopefully, Stephen King will forgive me if I got the quote exactly wrong. But it's true. They are a uniquely portable magic. And they are something where if you have a book, you don't have to always be on 24/7. And as somebody who, again, lives in a very difficult, I don't know if century is the right word, feels like it's been a century, but a very difficult time in the world, I need books more than ever, and that's part of my intent of starting up the booktube and going with that is that maybe there's other people like me out there who more than ever need to connect with books, need to be able to have that uniquely portable magic, need to be able to have community around them that says, hey, we're here, we aren't going anywhere, we can love together. And so that's my hope for this. Now, all the books I read, some of them are cozy fantasy, and I read a lot of genres. I do read horror sometimes, cannot watch horror movies, but I can read horror books. So, yes, not all of the book content that I come out with is going to be exactly like cozy. But my idea is to create a space where people can feel at least safe and seen and heard. And as a human being in this world myself, who is also very flawed, I am very open to communications and constructive critiques and just learning and growing myself. There's going to be times where I say things on here that weren't the best. I know that because that's human nature. I cannot possibly be perfect 24/7, and my opinions can change. But part of that, of me learning and growing and changing, is kind of bringing you guys on that journey and saying, hey, let's all grow and learn together. So hopefully this worked for you. I am sorry that it was a bit of a ramble, but I am trying to kind of figure out the way that this content works. With my autism, it is hard to make eye contact with the camera. So if you ever see that my eyes are kind of going in some places, weirdly, at least for right now, the difficulty with eye contact is actually happening for the camera for me as well. So please bear with me. I am also trying to figure out the sound quality. I'm trying to figure out the videoing. I don't want to invest in audio equipment quite yet, or video equipment quite yet. Right now, I'm just using what I have access to and this little $10 cute pink mic I got off of Amazon. But, as I learn and grow and as the community grows, hopefully I will be able to invest in some better things. But hopefully you will stick with me in the meantime. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and hopefully you will like, comment, subscribe, share. I think that's what the cool YouTubers say these days. And I hope you will stick around for my next one. Thank you all, and I will see you next time, lovelies. Bye.